war in Ukraine, the Kremlin has made a series of dramatic announcements in response to its floundering invasion of Ukraine. Russia and its proxies in Ukraine say they will hold referendum votes in occupied Ukrainian territory to officially recognize those areas as Russian. Foreign correspondent Tom Soufi Burridge has been there throughout these remarkable days in Ukraine, and he joins me live from Kharkiv, Ukraine, now for more. So, Tom, good to see you. How significant is this announcement that they're essentially going to hold these fake elections in order to annex these territories, or at least provide the groundwork for it? But they're losing on the battlefield. Can they do that?
I think it's hugely significant, Terry. Look, Putin's in a weak position right now. As you say, his forces have been pushed right back in this region up in the northeast. They've lost huge swathes of territory in recent days. And now Putin coming out with these quite sort of significant maneuvers. Firstly, those referenda votes that he says are going to be held as soon as Friday, both in southern occupied, Russian-occupied Ukraine and eastern Russian-occupied Ukraine. And I think the sort of significance of this is that Russia is effectively trying to rewrite the parameters by which it is fighting this conflict. And I think it is trying to say to the West in particular that in the future, once these referenda are held, and there's no doubt about it, we already know what the results of these referenda will be. I mean, I think, you know, the White House tonight and the Pentagon both saying that they will be a sham. And Russia is effectively trying to say that after these votes have been held, these territories, all this area of Ukraine, will effectively be, in Moscow's eyes, Russia. And they're trying to put a warning out to the West, I think, tonight, by saying, if you attack these territories in the future, you're effectively attacking Russia.
Ah. Well, they got to hang on to them first. And you've been there during this counteroffensive, the successful counteroffensive that Ukraine has launched. You're in Kharkiv. That was sort of where that offensive came out of, that region. Russia's stepping up its attacks on civilian infrastructure in response to that counteroffensive. So what's it like there? What are you hearing?
Well, Terry, we were in Izium yesterday, a newly liberated city. I mean, it's become synonymous for war crimes investigations because of that mass burial site that's been found there. But what was also significant on our trip was actually the amount of Ukrainian military equipment moving around. A lot of Ukrainian troops, tanks, armored personnel carriers on the move. I spoke also to a journalist who was in another city recently liberated called Kupiansk, further to the east, closer to the front lines. And that journalist telling me that this morning he was hearing artillery fire every 2 minutes out from Ukrainian positions. And again, today, we've heard from Kharkiv city, we're about 3 hours drive from that area. We heard outgoing fire by the Ukrainians throughout the morning on a fairly regular basis. We heard, we think, 2 Ukrainian fighter jets fly over the city just over our position here, which is quite dramatic. And I think this builds a picture of how the Ukrainians are still pushing. They're saying they're still fighting east of a river in the sort of eastern edge of the Kharkiv region, going into the Donbass. Remember, Putin's aim in this phase of the war is to take the entire Donbass. He's been knocked massively back by the counteroffensive, and now the Ukrainians still are claiming small victories and symbolically now claiming they've taken one village in the Luhansk province. Now, that is the northern half of the Donbass. And in July, Putin trumpeted their success, saying Russian forces were in full control of that region. They're not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. And I want to ask you, so it sounds like the Ukrainians still pushing their offensive, not consolidating at this point, partly because the Russian resistance was so weak. And I'm curious about how Vladimir Putin handles this politically. I know it's hard to get a sense always of what's going on in the Kremlin, but is he, in your estimation, endangered at all in his leadership because of the continuing compounding catastrophe of his decision to invade Ukraine?
Well, look, Putin is not at that UN General Assembly meeting today. He sent his foreign minister. And, you know, I think maybe he stayed away from there because he is increasingly isolated on the world stage. We had sort of hints from his meeting with China's President Xi at the end of last week that China is concerned about the war here in Ukraine. China, of course, a key ally of Russia in every respect, really. And then we had Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, publicly rebuking Putin, suggesting really that Putin should be looking for dialogue and peace and that this is not an era of war, as Narendra Modi put it. We've even had a suggestion from President Erdogan of Turkey about whether Russia has a legitimate claim to Crimea. Again, Erdogan has been a pretty key ally of Putin over the years. So internationally, he is increasingly isolated. At home, it's hard to gauge, but we're seeing superstar Russian singers come out on social media to criticize the war now. Highly significant. These are figures well known in Russia, well known in the Soviet Union, people who have influence on the population. It's hard to gauge public opinion in Russia right now, but you get a sense that Putin is on the ropes, not only internationally, but increasingly at home too.
The more he loses on the battlefield, the weaker his position becomes. Tom Soufi Burridge, great to see you. Stay safe. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Terry.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.